The views and opinions expressed in The Fact Is with Hollis Grant are those of Hollis Grant and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Droids Canada Network. Droids Canada Network does not take responsibility for any content or position produced by Hollis Grant and his show. Listener discretion is advised.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you for tuning in to another edition of The Fact Is. I'm your host, Hollis Grant, and on today's episode, we're not going to be talking about the questionable charges against former President Donald Trump. That could be an entire episode, and we could go into it for hours in length. But really what it comes down to for that particular topic is the charges, all 37 counts. But yet there's no additional or no new charges. So this is all stuff that he's already faced, already gone and questioned, and they're rehashing it out. We could go on and talk about the district attorney and the accusations of them being funded through George Soros. The accusations were made, and there is a connection to the district attorney receiving money from George Soros, but it's through a different organization. George Soros donated to a non-profit organization, and in turn, that non-profit organization donated to Alvin Bragg's campaign fund while he was running for the district attorney. So, not directly did George Soros provide those funds, but indirectly. But on today's episode, we're going to be talking about another issue that seems to be reaching a boiling point in society, to the point where governments are really going to step up and save people and make this an issue and force it upon the public. And we're talking about the transgender movement. With an upcoming election in Canada, this will be an election issue. With an upcoming election in America, this will be an election issue. And what's being used in this particular community is the cry for help. The we are being attacked. We do not feel safe. We are being threatened. We are being marginalized. Using all the words, we are the victims. Using all the words that the politicians want to hear to create the solution. Create the problem and create the solution. Now in Canada, there's a new private members bill that's being put forward. And I'd like you to hear the wording. And I would like to paint the picture of this interesting press conference with a young, overweight girl sitting at the front, a woman, an Asian woman at the podium speaking that has very far-leaning left views, was sitting on city council at Toronto, and Toronto is trying to pass the decriminalization of all drugs, just like they did in Vancouver. It is coming coming to Toronto, and that's thanks to Dr. Eileen Davila. We've covered Dr. Eileen Davila on past episodes on droidscanada.com that you can go ahead and listen to. We also have some very feminine looking, I guess we could say, I don't know, very large men standing in drag behind these petite women. And of course, there's some people that are wearing masks. But I'd like you to hear this particular clip from Member of Parliament.
Attorney General to create a 2S LGBTQI plus community safety zone to prohibit within 100 meters of the property any homophobic, transphobic act of intimidation, threat, offensive threats, offensive remarks, protest, disturbance, and distribution of hate propaganda within the meaning of the criminal code. It also comes with it a penalty of $25,000 if prosecuted successfully.
Now we're going to read the article from the CBC, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, or the Communist Broadcasting Corporation of Canada. Ontario NDP urges local protections for drag shows. Drag artists say protests at performances are negatively affecting their livelihoods. This is written by Alison Jones, and I believe we've covered Alison Jones on past episodes and past articles she's done. So you know that you're going to get a left-leaning side to this. Ontario NDP urged the government Tuesday to create community safety zones that would protect drag artists and LGBTQ communities from harassment and intimidation at their performances. Drag performances have been targeted by organized protests across the United States, but also here at home, said Kristen Wong-Tam. That was the former councillor in Toronto, who is putting forward a private member bill to designate 100-meter zones around show venues. The topic that brings us here is deadly serious, Wong Tam said at a press conference. The rise of hate and violence facing the 2SLGBTQI plus communities, including the drag artists, happening across Ontario and right across the nation has been alarming. There was a recent protest. I believe the protest was out in Vancouver. And yes, there was an assault. A man had a bloody nose, had gashes and open lacerations from an attack. And he was merely standing as a counter-protest. And he was attacked by a trans woman, attacked by a man. They went to press charges. The police, the RCMP, said that they would not press charges, that they had no evidence. The footage is online. It's very fascinating to see. Nonetheless, the RCMP will not press charges. So the only violence that is occurring at these trans rallies are from Antifa, the people that dress in their all-black clothing, the young kids that are disillusioned, that are recruited for events when half the time they don't even know what the event is about, and the trans people attacking. This wouldn't be the first attack by a transgendered woman or man, or a man pretending to be a woman. Jessica Yaniv and his escapades, where he openly attacked a reporter with a cane. Statistics Canada figures show 64% rise in police-reported hate crimes motivated by sexual orientation, jumping from 258 in 2020 to 423 in 2021. This is a population of 30 million people. Wong Tam, the NDP's critic on 2SLGBTQ plus issues, and who uses, of course, they and them pronouns, said her bill is designed to keep the community safe. Drag artists, their audiences, the businesses, and the facilities that host drag performances have been put at risk, Tam said, unless we put forward a strategy to protect them. Ontario's social, economic, and cultural richness is under attack. We have to protect that. Drag artist reports hate crime speech. The bill would allow the Attorney General to temporarily designate addresses, such as where a show is taking place, as community safety zones, and anti-LGBTQ harassment and intimidation, hate speech within 100 meters would be subject to a $25,000 fine. Scarlett Bobo, no word of a lie. Scarlett Bobo, a drag artist who has competed on Canada's Drag Race, said he has been subject to hate crimes and hate speech in recent weeks. Apart from the glamorous, dazzling, and wacky characters I play on television or in venues around the world, I also deal with the very real struggles of homophobia, hate crimes, and acts of purposeful intent to intimidate and now disqualify who I am as a person and what I do as a job, he said at a press conference with Wong Tam and other artists. Quote, drag is all about spreading love and acceptance and allows people to feel empowered and special. Drag artists and trans people have an inherent right to live freely and authentically in their truth. Everyone wants to and deserves to feel safe and valued in their work. That is why these recent acts of organized protest and hate speech need to be halted and condemned immediately. If anyone ever uses the term my truth, they're a liar. Or that's the way you experience your truth. If we can recall back to Justin Trudeau when he was called out for her sexual harassment of a reporter. And he said that had he known that she was a reporter, he would never have acted that way. And when he was called out for it, he said, well, that's the way that she experienced things, and that is her truth. But my truth is I did not do it, and I didn't act inappropriately. Now, drag shows have been going on for decades and decades. And drag was really popular back in the 40s, and the 50s. There was a lot of underground drag shows, lots of events, and people enjoyed them immensely. Those shows were actually for adults. Drag was meant to be adult oriented, very sexually charged, and a lot of fun. But the whole tone is about sex. Essentially a burlesque show where it's all about sexual jokes. No one cared before about drag shows. They were held, and they were usually held at night. They were usually held in clubs that drag people went to. They were usually held in gay areas of towns and been known for it. And people would go ahead and have their shows, and that's fine. Nobody ever targeted or had protests. But what the protests are about now, and what's happening now at these protests, these drag shows are being held during the day, and they're billed as all ages. And they're designed to have children. They're designed to push an agenda by making it an issue. They're deliberately using children. One, there is a serious problem with sexual allegations against children in that community. But they're using it, and they're using these events to further shed light on their lifestyle. They're activists. Has anyone ever stopped to ask the question, why on earth does a grown man dressing up in women's clothing, telling sexual humor, sexual jokes, want to sit down and read a prepubescent child, a book? Why does a grown man want to fondle themselves in front of a child? These are the questions that we should be asking. If you want to have a drag show, have your drag show. But don't have your drag show in front of children by doing these sexual acts. That's what the protests are about. Crystal Quartz, a drag artist based in Guelph, Ontario, said he permanently does shows for ages 19 and up. But after doing a few all-ages shows, he was targeted for harassment, first online, then in person, by what he described as an organized campaign. It's pretty interesting that it's only the moment that he starts doing the all-ages shows that he gets people saying, "What are you doing?" Then they started showing up to all my events, screaming at parents and myself, saying they were groomers, pedophiles, and a bunch of other homophobic slurs to make everyone there feel unsafe to attend, court said. These acts of intimidation now made our safe space feel unsafe. Unfortunately, all these venues decided to not rebook, leaving a huge loss of revenue for me and these businesses. And to be honest, I don't blame them. It was very scary for everyone involved as they just came to have a good time. Simple solution: don't have drag shows for children. That's what the protest is about. Don't have a drag show. Don't have sexual humor in front of prepubescent children. Responding to questions from the NDP in the legislature, Government House Leader Paul Calandra said once Wong Tam has tabled the bill, the House would give it due consideration. I think members on all sides of the House understand how important it is that everybody feels safe in the province of Ontario, and that we honor everybody's right to live and prosper in Ontario, regardless of who you are, who you love, and what God you worship, he said. Ontario, under the former Liberal government, created safe access zones around abortion sites, said NDP leader Merritt Stiles, called on Premier Doug Ford's government to offer the LGBTQ community the same protections. The sad truth is that this government has done nothing to recognize the growing violence against the queer community, and even less to help stop it, she said. New Democrats have been calling on Ford to act for months, but the Premier hasn't lifted a finger. Simple solution: stop performing sexual acts in front of children. But this will end up into an interesting topic as we follow the logic of the phrasing "love is love." That is the phrasing that all of the woke politicians will use, all of the thousand gender people will use, that love is love and I'm free to be who I am and I should be free to love who I want to love. Follow the saying to its eventual end. Love is love. If one person loves another person, are they free to love each other? And most of people would agree, yes, they are. But when you use that term, love is love, where does it stop? Because what's happening in the movement of the sexual identity movement, adding more letters to the alphabet, is the uncomfortable end of the logical train in the path that this is going down to add another letter on, is pedophilia. There are already talks of pedophiles to be added into the alphabet people. There's a fascinating TED Talk series from 2017 from a woman, a naturally born woman, a real woman, in Germany, making the argument that these people are fine and there's nothing wrong with the way that they are. There's already talks about pedophilia in academic groups. When you follow the logical path of that phrasing of love versus love is love, it does not end well. You need to have standards. You need to not have sexual charged entertainment for prepubescent children. If you truly care about a child's discovery and self-discovery and being able to discover what they like on their own terms, then you should not be interfering with someone's self-discovery process. And they shouldn't be reading to children. What's more disturbing is that the Drag Story Hour, which we have covered before, the rainbow dildo fiasco, where a grown man had a dildo, a rainbow-colored dildo. He's dressed up as a monkey, and he appeared to the Drag Story Time and cited that he didn't know that it was really a Drag Story Time. He was just told to go to the venue, which happens to be a library, and there you go. It was a big mishap. I didn't mean to wear my rainbow dildo. But a lot of these trans activists are paid. Recent libraries, systems in Vancouver, have been outed as paying for these storytime tellers, having to lay off staff in order to hire these people to appear at events. It's almost you get into the recent ad campaign for Bud Light and all the jokes that have gone along with this. A man's pretending to be a woman, and a beer, light beer is pretending to be beer. It's a match made in heaven. All the jokes aside, all Budweiser cares about is discussion. And in fact, that's a non-stop joke and non-stop advertising for Bud and Bud Light. And it doesn't matter what they believe. It's being consumed. The media is being consumed. Everyone's consuming the visual, talking about the beer. A Kid Rock shooting beer with his gun. The simple solution is just not to buy the beer. If you don't want your politics involved in your product, don't consume it. If you don't like football players telling you what to do and telling you what to buy and when to kneel for a national anthem, don't watch it. Don't make an announcement. There's no need to make an announcement for it. Simply just don't buy the beer, and there's no need to talk about it. Because the more that you talk about it, the more it gains traction and more views and more people discuss, and the popular it becomes. But if you do find yourself going to a drag story hour, if you're going to one of those counter protests, simply ask the question, why does a grown man want to read a book to a little child? And why does a drag performer want to perform in front of a child? I'd like to thank you for listening today, and hopefully this bill is not passed so that we don't get fined the $25,000 for misgendering an awful lot of people on this show. Thank you for tuning in again to another edition of The Fact Is. I'm your host, Hollis Grant, and I hope you have yourself a great week. Hi, this is Hollis Grant, host of The Fact Is. You can find us Wednesdays on droidscanada.com, where we discuss current affairs from around the world.